a lot more dignified. But DOHMH turned that funding down. We don't need it, and offered the health rationale for turning it down. And at present, this is where we're at.
The AIDS epidemic. Here's some of what I mean. Over the past several years, New York City has closed one STD clinic after another for 2 to 5 years for renovations. Only once did it replace the shuttered facility. In part because of these closings, between 2010 and 2014, the number of visits to the city's STD clinics plummeted from 123,000 a year to 83,000. Add to those closings cuts in the years of the severest cuts. In that same time frame, from 2010 to 2014, diagnoses of gonorrhea in men increased by more than 40%. And again, from 2010 to 2014, diagnosis of syphilis in men increased by a third. This is an HIV issue as well. Studies show that syphilis is highly predictive of future HIV infection. Yet the head of the city's STD Bureau recently declared that the city has no plan for dealing with syphilis. And when we asked her why, she looked at us as if the question had come from another planet. To top it all off, as you have heard, this past March, the city shut down its busiest clinic for renovations, the Chelsea STD Clinic, effectively snuffing out that dreamed of hub of care at the center of the city's HIV epidemic. After this latest closing, sexual health visits to the city STD clinics dropped by another 18%. Little wonder then that this moribund bureau has trouble attracting qualified personnel and holding on to them. If we are ever to trust the Bureau of STD Control with an important piece of ending the epidemic, here is some of what has to happen. New York City has to restore to its clinics the essential STD services and HIV testing that it cut early in this decade. In other words, Bill de Blasio, take public health in New York City off the starvation diet that Mike Bloomberg put it on. Within DOHMH, the Bureau of STD Control will need the kind of dynamic leadership that can galvanize the Bureau and start to redeem its recent legacy of failure. The Bureau of STD Control needs to be integrated with the Division of HIV so the city's STD clinics can smoothly assume positions as hubs of care in ending the AIDS epidemic. The Bureau has to marshal its forces in support of its important role within this historic ending the epidemic effort, and the Bureau should exploit its place in that mission, using it as a magnet to draw and keep the best personnel. The Bureau of STD Control will have to develop an action plan for dealing with the principal sexually transmitted infections. This is more important than ever. Patterns of condom usage may change with the uptake of PrEP, and patterns of STD testing most certainly will. The Bureau has to be sensitive enough to catch these changes and flexible enough to deal with them. Here are a few important subsidiary issues. State law has led the city to introduce a sliding fee for services at STD clinics. City health officials have privately voiced the fear that this almost certainly presents an obstacle to testing the most vulnerable New Yorkers. So at the very least, DOHMH has to monitor for the ill effects of clinic fees and develop programs to mitigate those effects. Finally, given the Bureau's record of failing the community, the Bureau has to invite community oversight and participation as it works to undo this record of failure and realize its mission in ending the epidemic. New York City's Bureau of STD Control has been a public health backwater for far too long. If we hope to use our STD clinics as vehicles for ending the epidemic and for achieving wider public health goals, we will have to whip the Bureau into shape. We cannot waste our historic opportunity to end the AIDS epidemic. And if, as we revitalize New York City's Bureau of STD Control, we also manage to unionize it, we might actually succeed in making the city's STD clinics true centers of sexual health and wellness. And what a bonus that would be.
And I'm a member of ACTUPNY New York. I also work for and so one of the things that we were really interested as we uncovered more and more and as we dug deeper and deeper to what seemed to be a unfolding crisis and scandal was how the city's response to the HIV epidemic has been affected. And one of the things that we have been talking so much about in the last few years when we were talking about ending the epidemic is HIV testing as not only a way to improve the healthcare of the HIV-positive individual, but also to reduce the probability that that person spreads HIV. We know that the most effective way we're going to drive down HIV incidence, or the number of new infections that happen, is by increasing testing. The City Department of Health has gone as far as to say that more tests equal less infections. And we sort of believe the city's rhetoric for, I think, far too long. We assumed that if they were saying that more infections equals less, more tests equals less infections, that they were going to perform more tests. Mm-hmm. But when we looked back at what was going on with the number of HIV tests that the city found, we were stunned. If just looking at the number of HIV tests that were performed at the city STD clinics, which are basically the front lines of the HIV epidemic, even today, we saw that between 2010 and 2011, in a single year, they cut 15,000 HIV tests. Right? By 2014, we had lost a total of 23,606 HIV tests per year. That is an 18% decrease. Right? And when we asked what happened here, the answers were even more disturbing. What happened between 2010 and 2011, in order to save $400,000, the Bureau of STD Control decided that people who present to the STD clinics with no symptoms, if they don't tell the triage nurse, they don't tell the nurse at the front desk that they have burning or itching, they don't get to be seen. They don't get care, despite the fact that a lot of STDs, including gonorrhea and syphilis, are not symptomatic a lot of the time. In gonorrhea's case, it can be upwards of 40%. So people stopped going to the clinic because they didn't get any care. Furthermore, they stopped doing HIV tests. If you came in and said that you had an HIV test within the last 3 months, so despite the fact that the city has been showing off about the implementation of the state testing law, which requires every healthcare provider to offer an HIV test at every stage of care, they themselves, at the same time, without telling anyone, instructed their staff to deny HIV tests to people who may be asking for them if they said that they had gotten tested recently. And we know that the highest risk populations are presenting to the STD clinics. And despite this massive cut, they didn't actually increase the efficiency of their testing endeavors. In other words, what we call the positivity rate remained constant over that time, which means, simply put, they were catching less infections. And less infections and they were catching less infections and less tests means more new HIV infections. And that is exactly the opposite of what the city has been telling us that they're trying to do. The point is that, and if you go to the next slide, we next looked at the total number of HIV tests that were funded citywide by the Department of Health. Now, once again, these are free tests that the Department of Health uses federal money and state money to, and their own city tax dollars, to provide tests to the most underserved populations, which are also the populations that are most at risk. And what we found is that between 2010 and 2011, the City Department of Health cut 116,000 HIV tests per year and never told a soul. They never told anyone. After meeting with ACT UP and TAG and many other activists and advocates, they never mentioned that despite the fact that they say more tests equals less infections, at that exact time, they were cutting tests. They were cutting tests. That the very key to ending this epidemic, they were simultaneously undermining while they were saying that they were trying to end it. And that really brings us back, I think, to the main point of why we're all here today. For 3 decades, our community has faced this plague that has killed hundreds of thousands of us, many of whom have fought in this very building for years. We fought. Our community stood up and fought for treatment. Our community stood up and fought for civil rights. And it's time that we recognize that our community has the ability to end this epidemic. For the first time, the end is in sight. Science has delivered the answer. The question now is, can we force our society to implement that? Can we force our government to be honest enough with us? Can we force our government to care enough that they will fund HIV testing, that they will fund expanded access to antiretroviral treatment, to expanded access to PrEP? We can do it, but we cannot do it if our community is silent. And that is what ACT UP is ultimately always has been about. We need to today unite and stand up and say to Mayor de Blasio, who got elected on the backs of the LGBT population, we need to rise up and say, we elected you, you need to respect our health care. We need to demand it. Enough is enough. 100,000 New Yorkers dying of HIV have died from this epidemic. Enough is enough. We can do it, we can end it, and we need your help to basically demand that our government basically ends this plague for once and for all. Thank you.
So now we're going to open it up to the audience, and the way we'll do this is, we know that a lot of folks in here like to talk a lot. And in order to make sure that we hear as many voices as possible, we're going to ask folks if you have a question, right? Not a comment, rolled up as a question, but an actual question. We'll give you 60 seconds, a minute to do so, right? If you have a comment, right, 90 seconds, right, to give your comment so then we can move on to the next person. So I will ask you that. If it gets close to time, I may come up next to you, give you slight hints that it's time to move on, but we will ask folks to use this mic over here on the side so that we can make sure everyone is able to hear. So if you could line up over in front of the mic, we will take questions and comments. And I also want to say too, all right.
Hi, my name is Yatana Damai from ACT UP New York. I want to say that I hope our effort to get the DOHMH to restore these services is accompanied by an aggressive promotional campaign to let communities know through all broadcast media, through print media, that they've been restored, because people have been showing up and they're balking. They're seeing a white van and being told, get in the van, sir, get in the van. And DOHMH had assured us in conference calls that they would make sure these people are competent, and nothing like that has occurred. This needs to be promoted, restored services need to be promoted in Next Magazine, in the New York Post, on local broadcast television, local cable television, and websites that serve the New York area. It should be fixed, and the community needs to know about it, because it needs to reverse their pattern of incompetence and lying. They're not doing their jobs, and they're lying through their fucking teeth.
Hi, my name is Brendan Sonero, a member of ACTUPNY. I can take nothing away from James and Jim and Jeremiah, who have been doing just unbelievable amount of work with the Epidemic Coalition. And I am very encouraged to see Chelsea Louis, the head of GMAC here, and many other people that are involved in ending the epidemic. Does anyone have an answer why this coalition has not come out with a response to the closing of this clinic? I mean, why is it taking only ACTUP and TAG to create this town hall? Why have not all these groups come together and risen up and said, wait a minute, this is ground zero, we're not going to end epidemic by 2020 this way.
I just want to take a moment to announce that we are passing around pens and index cards. If you do not feel comfortable, asking your questions, please write them down and we will read them out loud. If anyone cares to respond to the last comment.
It's been a fast-moving target. I think that Jim and I have an opportunity to bring up this issue at the meeting of the AIDS Advisory Committee to the governor, and in the epidemic subcommittee, which is meeting later this week or next week?
Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, so we have an opportunity to actually ask for their endorsement of a plan to restore the services, and I think we should do that. But basically, the coalition was, the Ending the Epidemic Task Force was composed of 63 different stakeholders, some of whom are actually our targets, are the people that would have been in those chairs. So it's not surprising that they're not involved in trying to solve it. But we should be trying to get more people from that coalition on board. And I hope that this meeting will be one way of helping to do that.
That's Mark Harrington from TAG.
I also just want to say, in terms of why the ETE committee hasn't been, I think, more responsive to this issue, is it's because, simply put, they didn't know. I mean, and I'm talking from basically my personal experience with 3 ETE members who I know quite well, that we discovered this basically by accident 3 different times, right? Essentially, John Riley, when we first started doing ACTUP member, when we first started doing the analysis of what's going on with the STD Bureau, we found this massive cut. John actually found this massive cut in the STD clinic visits. When I then sort of started crunching the numbers, I was thinking that maybe perhaps the Department of Health was just funding HIV tests elsewhere. When we got this data, we really realized that we had a massive problem. And I think that the important thing to realize is that the city hasn't been public and hasn't been honest about what's been going on with their response. And so we can't really blame the ETE people yet for that. We have to blame the city and say that they need to be more honest and transparent. And it's telling that they're not here today.
Hi, I'm Kyle Tremonti. I actually just moved here from Texas and I've been trying to get tested to no avail. So this is kind of a new issue for me here in New York City. What can I do? What can we do in our everyday lives to fix this problem once we leave this place, besides being informed? Do you have any things that we can do?
So actually, ACTUP has been working on this, and we weren't expecting this question so soon. We wanted to keep people discussing it, but it seems as though the conclusions are rather evident. So I would like to invite Andy Velez and Luis Santiago to perhaps give a short response to that?
Power is never transferred voluntarily. You have to make it hard for people. We learned a long, long time and a hard way in the epidemic that health care is a right. The people in this room are the experts about health here in New York and need to be included in any planning, any events that are going to be happening to address the needs in this catastrophe that has come about. I've sat at the table with a number of these people a number of times, and it isn't just discouraging, it's, are we talking the same language? Are we talking about people's lives? Are we talking about urgency? Doesn't seem to be that way. I'll tell you some of the things we need to do. We need to speed up the renovation of the clinic and the temporary clinic. I know that Corey Johnson, who's been helpful and involved, also said, oh no, it's out of the question to build a temporary clinic on the ball field in the area near the present clinic. And by the way, I won't hesitate to say, use this language, the present clinic, before it was shut down, was a shithole. I mean, if you ever had to go there for help, and I did, you know, it was a mess. And I took a hepatitis test there, and they never told me that a hepatitis treatment hadn't worked. It was only later when I saw another doctor who said, you know, you need to do it over. It didn't work. That's the quality of the care. So we need to get this temporary clinic going. We need to provide all possible support for neighborhood clinics and community organizations for expanded testing and prevention services. This should be ABC, garden variety. I mean, we're not talking about, you know, fancy clothes for a party. We're talking about life and death. That's what this is about. We need to convene a community board immediately to oversee clinic renovation and the restoration of services. Some of the people in this room should be sitting on that community board because we learned early on in the epidemic that those people who were living with these issues knew a lot that the providers did not. And lastly, we have to determine how many people have been not getting the measures that they need, and we need to find ways to engage them for care. We need you. ACT UP meets every Monday night here at 7 o'clock. I expect to see every one of you next time. And if you can't make it next week, then make it the week after. Because we need your help. And together we really can make a difference.
I just want to say that we can circle back to this later in the meeting because there was some discussion about some direct action that we can take immediately after this meeting. We'll come back to that. So, Terry.
Hi, I'm Terry Wilder. I was on the governor's task force in AIDS. The meeting that Mark was referring to is this Thursday from 1 to 3. It's at 90 Church Street. Folks can come to that meeting and sit in the public section. If you want to, during our public comments, bring this issue up. I also will email Charles King tonight and Marjorie Hill and ask if it can actually be put on the agenda so that we can have some space on the agenda. I just want to clarify a couple of things. People throw around the word committee and coalition. it was a task force that had a limited time to work on the end of the epidemic recommendations. So it's the task force developing and this blueprint, that term is over. So what has happened now is that a few of us, myself included, Jim Igo, Mark Harrington, Charles King, etc., were then invited to be part of this kind of subgroup, kind of under the AIDS Advisory Council, to kind of follow through to make sure the blueprint was implemented. So I just want to clarify for people, the task force ended, we had a term, and so now we're kind of this subgroup of people who meet periodically to follow up on the implementation of the plan. So again, I just want to piggyback on what Mark said, that if people are interested in this topic and they want to make sure it's brought to this group that's associated with the AIDS Advisory Council, if you can, please show up on Thursday at 1 o'clock at 90 Church Street.
So an index card question, I'm sorry.
Sure.
The question is, how does criminalization resulting in the rent boy bust affect access to clinical services? What does this mean for harm reduction?
With everything that's gone on with rent boy, we realize that there is some parallel. This is a very separate sort of issue, and we don't want to lose focus on the fact that we really need to put the pressure on the city, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, to actually restore services fully to our community. But I do think that the overall theme is that we need to band together as a community. LGBT health and sexuality continues to be something that they could cut funding for. Now apparently Homeland Security can come and invade LGBT themed websites. And
Tell you what a sling is.
I think that these are concerning things all the time. I think that we're, no matter how far we've come, I appreciate, so many of the victories that we've had in the LGBT movement, and marriage is massive. But I think that our sexuality still isn't front and center. And that's what really that's a primary part of why we're a community, is because of who we love and who we fuck. And I think that continues to be the case, and we need to continue to band together. And tonight, sign up on the sign-up list. Make sure that you're out here with us, so that as actions continue, related to this issue or other LGBT sexual health issues in the future, I think it's important that we band together.
Hi, good evening. My name is Noah Barth. I'm not associated with ACT UP or any of the other groups here tonight. We'll talk. But I was born and raised here in Chelsea, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Because growing up, I saw it really become the center of gay life here in New York City, and becoming an inclusive atmosphere and a safe space for people of different sexualities. And the thing about it is having a really inclusive community or environment should not just be a function of the private sector, right? Of bars and clubs and inclusive houses of worship and things of this nature. But it also needs public investment. And not necessarily in terms of dollars, but public resources and public entities and politicians standing up and saying that you count, you matter, we care about you. And when you close down an STD clinic in the center of a community that's the hub of social life for a very vulnerable population, it basically sends the message that we don't care about you. That your health, your life is not important to us, and that's wrong. Especially when you close it without any consultation and just put up a cheap sign. It's a big middle finger. So just one other thing I want to note real quick, and we can move on, is we've talked a lot about the LGBT community and how it's affected by this situation. I want to also note for people that maybe are unaware or lost sight of it, that the Robert Fulton houses and the Chelsea Elliott houses are both just a couple blocks away from where we're sitting tonight. And they house significant populations of low-income people of color who are also high vulnerability groups for STD transmission. And anyone here who's looked at epidemiology at all, public health at all, knows that one of the largest barriers to care is simply proximity to points of care. So telling somebody, who's on a fixed budget, on a fixed income, that you got to take a train ride, 4 miles uptown or all the way across town to LES or something like that, to get what you need, a lot of them are going to just shy away and say, yeah, maybe it'll go away. Maybe it's not that important. So this isn't just a gay issue. This isn't just a queer issue. This isn't just a black or white issue. It's a human issue. Okay? And, if the politicians don't want to do it or don't want to, spend their political clout, their political capital to change the situation strictly because it's the right thing to do, you can do it from enlightened self-interest, or you can do it, for the sake of better public health in the entire city. Because this isn't just, some small contained group and it's diseases that are going to go away on their own. It has a big impact on our entire city. Thank you.
With Latino Commission on AIDS, I just really want to show up and really say thank you to ACTUP and TAG. It's really, really important to us, to our community, and I think sexual health is non-negotiable. We cannot play with that. Our well-being of our communities across the board must be a priority. And I just really want to add my voice, my presence, and also as part of the task force and the advisory council. And I'm going to voice my tonight to ask Hill to put it in the agenda. I think this is an urgent issue. We need actions, and I will invite all of us to create a domino effect, not only with actions, with our presence, but also through social media, to our different venues, to create, I think, the pressure to get a better answers and also better results. ACTUP, New York.
Thank you.
So it's me again, I guess. But one of yeah, not very different, right? So one of the things that I think has been really missing from this conversation is sort of a little bit of outrage. I think we should be a little bit more angry about what's going on here, because we have to realize that the city hasn't, for all of the scientific innovations that we've had in HIV prevention, the city, in terms of HIV prevention for gay men, has made zero progress. We have the same number of new infections today that we had in 2001. Right?
They fought progress.
They literally the same. 2001, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't Facebook, there wasn't iPhone, there wasn't PrEP, there wasn't treatment prevention, there wasn't third generation HIV test, there wasn't fourth generation HIV test. For all of that progress, it hasn't made a diddly. I don't know. A diddly. Right? Yeah, I don't know. But it hasn't made any information to actual people's lives. And ask the question, would they be treating any other health crisis that they didn't make any progress on in 14 years if it wasn't a thing that was affecting gay, bisexual men and trans women? This is homophobia in terms of public health. We have to marriage is great, but if you're sick, if we don't respond to an epidemic that killed more people than all the American soldiers.
What's the first demo?
Tonight, right after this, we go to Chelsea Clinic, we go tonight. Who's with me? I'm going. Let's get angry.
Marriage is not a condom.
We will not go to the race until a gay child can say to his mother, I'm gay. And the first response is not, just don't get AIDS. We will not be free until we no longer need PrEP or PrEP, and you don't need another ART. And Gilead Sciences does not get their gay tax every time you fuck. You will know your freedom when the federal government and the state stop sending in their troops to shame you as they did last week, and instead, we put that money toward your health care and your sexual health. Very Catholic, ACT
up is a group of privileged white men with nothing better to do. I got 40 cows to milk and a field to plow. I also got AIDS in New York City. Look around you. They're trying to make you invisible, trans women, bisexuals, rank boys, black MSM. They are throwing you in an invisible slump. They are saying you're nothing but a bunch of privileged white men. They're making you all one. And they're erasing who you are. Shame on them. Shame. We will take to the streets. We will burn their shit down. If I have to fucking slit my wrist and blood in the gutter, I will. We will shut it down, and we will not stop until they return everything we had prior to 2010. Am I right? I'm going to wrap it up.
I just have a quick question. These charts and graphs are amazing. The work that you all have done is amazing. But we do have to fucking demand this stuff. We have to stop asking, we have to start telling, and we need this information, we need to get some bulleted information together. I wanted to get this out to everybody that's signed in here tonight. I would love to be able to work with you all on putting this in some sort of a concise form that we can put out on social media, that we can send to everybody, that we can get this message out after we go out tonight, to get other people who are just as interested as we are, because I think people are going to be fucking pissed off when they see this, and if they're not, we have to make sure that they are.
Absolutely. So there's a couple things. Surely we want to move into a discussion about what action steps we can take. You know, folks are already talking about going to the clinic tonight to do a demonstration. But before that, I know that there are a couple folks who want.
There's 3 more. I'll wait.
Yeah, all right. Okay. We'll take these and then come to you.
Thank you. Thank you, ACTUP, for calling this meeting. I really want to speak to Corey and Letitia. Very simple. Where is the temporary clinic going to be, and when are you going to put it up? That's the simplest thing I want to ask you. All the other things we're talking about are things that are important. But the basic need to have something in this neighborhood which serves the needs, the health needs, not just of women, but of all the people that live in this neighborhood. I want to challenge both of you, and you're our friends. If you're the voices that's going to go back to City Hall, and you're going to have to say, when are we putting this up, and where is it going to be?
Hi, I'm Mark Romano. I have a question for our number crunchers, and I want to ask if anybody else is aware of this, of what New York State has done with its numbers. I think we all know that the plan to end the epidemic, one of the major parts of it is getting over 80% of people with HIV virally suppressed. It's a critical part of the plan, right? And the number of people virally suppressed in New York State just jumped up from 42% to 54%. And that was not because anybody new got on treatment. That was because New York State just removed 24,000 people from its estimate of the people with HIV in New York State. And they did this by looking at lab tests, and if you're a person with HIV who has not had an HIV-related lab test in the last 5 years, you were removed from the rolls. So now we have officially 24,000 less people with HIV in New York State, and therefore the number who are virally suppressed goes up 42 to 54%. Has anybody in ACTUP looked at this? What do we think about this? Are we comfortable with these numbers?
Figures don't lie, but liars can figure.
Well, hang on a second. I'll let Mark respond because I know he's paying attention to that.
I haven't done the match. I did it, so I can get that if you want. Did you?
Yeah.
I mean, what I know is that the state took the death index and measured it to the HIV cohort, and they took out anyone that's dead.
Yeah.
So that was part of that. And then they took out people that hadn't had labs done in the state for, I thought it was 8 years.
5
So it
years
was 5 years.
for AIDS and 8 years for HIV.
Yeah, so I think you can probably assume that if somebody hasn't had a lab test in New York for that long, that they're either dead or out of state.
I wonder. I mean, I think a lot of people are not, not in care or not getting lab tests done. So I don't know. If we're all comfortable with this, that's fine. But I just want to let people know.
I think it would be worth digging down a little bit further. I think it's great for you to brought this up.
I actually have the data right here. And so So what they did essentially is they removed 25,200 people who either had, as you said, person with AIDS with no evidence of care for 5 years, or a person who's diagnosed with HIV but non-AIDS with no evidence of care for 8 years. And and
that's lab tests only.
Yeah, so that's the way the city generally, the state generally monitors care. It's through something called the Electronic Clinical Laboratory Reporting System, or ECLAIRS. And generally, I think in talking just to to Lou Smith about this, just personally, I think that there has been a pretty high, sort of demonstration that it actually is pretty good at identifying people who have either died or moved out of state. There has been a little bit of attempt to validate it, but it is something that we need to. Oh, sorry. The epidemiologist for the New York State Department of Health and the AIDS Institute. Sorry. Okay, I'm falling down a rabbit hole.
That's okay.
It is
important, but it's a slightly different issue.
Yeah.
I just think ACT UP can take that on. So I just want to keep us on the conversation for tonight. So next person.
First of all, I have to.
Into the mic, Ken.
Sorry. I have to give a hat to Mark Milano for that specific piece of data. In my experience, as a provider for many years, I have to say that I'm more inclined to believe that there are more people who are just dropping out completely from care, and we're not seeing them much as we don't even have a clue of how many people, for example, are living with hepatitis C, for example. I mean, we are so blowing our opportunity to actually see what's going on, what's driving the epidemic of HIV through this way. But we're under-testing for HCV, we're under-testing for HIV, and one of the things that I wanted to ask James about, and anyone who's actually correlated any data here, if you look at what's going on with the tests, if you correlate that information to the number of people who are on Medicaid, for example, the Medicaid rolls, or the number of, and I want people in this room to think, how many of you have not experienced the opening of an ambulatory care clinic run by a not-for-profit hospital in your neighborhood, within a 10-block area in the last 4 or 5 years? Correlate that information with this number of tests being done through specific areas. Correlate that with the average income, or however they document that of the neighborhoods where these ambulatory care centers are opening. Seemingly it takes 2 weeks to open a fucking ambulatory care center in New York City. I don't understand why it would take this long to fix one clinic in Chelsea. Come on, this
It's
is
embarrassing.
It's unmitigated bullshit is what it is. It's just another example of how this entire city, this entire state is just, they're pushing people of lower income, they're pushing, and we know who those people are. Who don't, primarily communities of color, they're single men, they're sex workers, they're people who just don't have the money to live in the areas where they're building all these readily accessible, fabulous clinics for everyone. And I think until we stop allowing that to continue to occur, as far as the whole housing issue, etc. I mean, how come that's on the housing issue, for example, is on the front page of the New York Times once every 5 years, for example, and you know, I think that we have to start looking at it. This is all about income inequality. This is all about people with a lot of money being told by the state, being told by our progressive mayor, all right? Our progressive mayor, who's basically saying, no, we need to bring in more people with lots of money in order to, fuel our tax buffers with taxes from them. But at the same time, I mean, look what we're getting. We're not, we're just not getting what we deserve as residents of the city. And we've got to stop them from throwing us out of our housing, throwing us out of our neighborhoods. At the same time, we're demanding that they provide for our sexual health. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Letitia James, and I am the public advocate of the city of New York. I guess you say, what's a public advocate? Well, the current mayor was the public advocate. But let me just explain to you before I get into my comments. The role of public advocate is basically to hold the mayor of the city of New York accountable for his actions. So that's why I'm here. I'm here because the overriding question is this. This administration has interrupted and reversed the policies of the previous administration on a wide range of issues. And the question for me is, why not on health care for individuals in vulnerable populations? And so why would they close a clinic without notice? Because for me, it's really about values and priorities. Yes, Black lives matter, but gay lives matter, trans lives matter, all of us matter. And so the question is why. I want to thank ACTUP, I want to thank Treatment Action Group, I want to thank Councilmember Corey Johnson for all that he has done working on this issue, and with many of you here tonight. AIDS has not been cured. STDs have not been cured. And yes, silence equals death, but also indifference equals death, and the lack of planning equals death, and closing clinics equals death. And these charts are really charts in contradiction. They're really charts in contradiction. And so clearly, despite the incredible progress we have made over the last several decades to test and treat New Yorkers exposed to sexually transmitted diseases, we are moving backwards. And so crucial funding for STD testing at the city level has been cut and has never ever been restored, and the question is why. And clinics like the Chelsea STD Clinic right in this neighborhood are closing, and we're left with no alternatives. The clinic in Fort Greene, which is surrounded by all of this luxury housing, is being threatened each and every day. And as someone said before, the Chelsea Clinic looked like whatever. The reality is most of these clinics look like what, but they're sitting on very valuable property. Yes, very valuable property. And so it's, Chelsea has one of the highest rates of HIV infection, so why would you close a clinic and not provide notice to this community? Or any contingencies, or no planning. No planning with all of the stakeholders in this community, such as all of you. And that really is the question that I must pose, along with your wonderful council member, to the mayor of the city of New York.
Yeah.
What other fuck-ups do they have in store?
Oh, that's another way of putting it. So the question is the irresponsibility and short-sightedness is all around us, and we've seen the data. Listen, gonorrhea in men up by 40%, chlamydia in men 15% increase, and the number of new cases of primary and secondary syphilis.
Shameful.
Diagnosed in men, it's increased by 33%.
That's for the drug crisis we're dealing with.
And so these rates should be going down, not up. And we know that
rate's gonna make it worse.
but when our clinics are being shuttered and communities are, it's okay, I like town hall meetings. I love passion, it's okay, I love town hall meetings. People can shout out if you feel the need to. That's right. And so our clinics are being shuttered and communities are not being provided with credible alternatives. And so we need the mayor and the Department of Health and the mental health to make public health a priority in Chelsea and all throughout the city of New York. And this is a community that grapples with some of the highest rates of HIV and AIDS, and we have buried too many memorials and too many funerals. We must put an end to it. And if you are serious about ending HIV and AIDS by 2020, this is not the way to do it. So how can you get tested if you're closing facilities in high-risk neighborhoods? How can you get tested? How can this young gentleman from Texas?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, Jesus, Texas. How can you get tested? How can you get tested? This community needs a dedicated and robust STD clinic capable of providing health care. And we need it now for all communities. And so someone gave us an action plan. And so we really need to move forward. We need to move forward along with your council member in getting an alternative clinic as soon as possible. We need more data, we need outreach, we need to speed up renovation, we need a temporary clinic, we need to identify it, we need to make sure that we expand CBOs and preventive services so that they are, again, stepping in the vacuum. And we obviously need more oversight, and we need the community board clearly to look after the renovations. I join with all of you. I join with Councilmember Johnson. I join with you because I care about you. Someone said because you need to hear politicians say they care. I've cared about this community long before I was an elected official. It's not about politics, it's about love. It's about making sure that you're safe. It's about making sure that we provide health care to all of you. And so I stand with all of you today as we speak to the mayor of the city of New York, who I plan to have a meeting with very shortly, and to let him know that this is a priority and we need to make sure that we get this clinic opened as soon as possible.
We will be backing up on you. We will be there if you need us. And we will be there if you don't need us.
And I know that you will act up. Yeah. And I need you to do that.
So let's talk about what we're going to do with the energy in the room. So we have some options. Tonight we can go and we can march to the site of the clinic, the shuttered clinic, to show our anger. I believe we have tea lights. Is that right? Was Michael here?
Yes.
So we have tea lights. So we can march together and bring our light to the empty space that is the Chelsea Clinic. I think that will make us feel good and that will direct some of that energy in the room. However, the clinic is closed. No one's there. So we need to go to the places where the decisions are being made, right? Right? So we know that ultimately the buck stops with the mayor. And we also know that the buck stops with Department of Health. We have some sites downtown that we can hit in the daytime when they're in their offices.
Yes.
We have some media here who I think would like to ask some follow-up questions of some of the politicians that we are trying to hold responsible. So we can talk about planning an action for tomorrow, for next week, but I just want to throw that out there. Andy seems to have comments.
Yeah, it's 5 to 8. Just to get a temperature of the room. How many people here tonight would like to go up to the clinic and open your mouths up there and let them know we're around? Right here. While people were talking, I thought of something. There is a new park across the street from where St. Vincent's used to be before we got screwed out of that house. And there is a part of the park that hasn't been opened up yet. And I wondered, could that actually be made a temporary clinic? I'm not sure. But I think we need to think of spaces around that would supply that need. And the DOHMH has all kinds of stories and reasons why it can't happen. That's because they don't want it to happen. When you decide we're going to make something happen, guess what? You find a way to do it. That's always been our history in ACTA and TAG, and we're going to do it now. So if you all want to march tonight, you can march tonight. We'll meet on Monday at 7 o'clock. I'll be planning more. So we need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I just want to step in and say, Annette, Andy, thank you for talking about this possible march. It's great. We've got about 14 posters lined up along the room. You see them here. I've got a couple back there. And what we'll do is we'll be outside the door, so we stay in line with the fire department, right? With these tea light candles.
Speak it to the mic.
Inside these cups, and we will light them for you, and you can carry them. In a way, when we came up with this idea, I didn't get the exact number of tea lights, but think about when you light this. This is somebody that's not getting tested, not getting treated.
But even more than that, I mean, and this is great, and thank you so much, Michael, but I think, for a community that is clearly really upset about what's going on with the Rentboy raids last week, for the community that's really upset with what's going on here, even more than, I think that we really want people to march up there.
Cam Bio wants to donate 6,000 HIV tests.
Yay!
Thank you so much. But if you want to just walk up there and show that we're actually really frustrated about this, and really show that there's a force of us that came here tonight, and actually show that we're really upset about what's going on with our sexual health in this community. We really hope that you walk with us. Candle, no candle, but come with us. We're going to walk up there, and we're going to have a chance to show just how upset we are about what's going on here.
But I want to be clear here. But before we do that, I would like to add one more point of clarity for our community. This is a town hall, and it's a unique opportunity for us to hear about what attempts have been being made to resolve the situation by negotiations with public officials, the community, and the DOHMH. And Corey Johnson has been hosting those very difficult meetings, and he's here tonight, and he's been on the edge trying to negotiate. He got the city deputy mayor, Lillian Barrios-Fioli, who's on her way out now, to commit the millions of dollars necessary to provide a temporary prefabricated facility on the sites at 9th Avenue in Chelsea, and Mary Bassett turned it down. Okay? We have now rotating mobile units that are vans that have been taken off other things like looking for TV in Queens and Brooklyn, doing like rotating duty with rotating quality of services, and we don't have a plan to fix the interim facility that's been talked about. And I'd like to get Corey's take on what's going on with his inside negotiations with the city about what our options are and what is the best possible option to get out of this.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, ACTUP, Larry, for having this town hall tonight. I don't want to completely rehash. Sorry I'm late. There was a fire up at Manhattan Plaza. It's like a woman lost her life, so I was up there, which is why I was late coming here. So I'm sorry for not being here earlier when a lot of this was discussed. But I do want to give a brief update, and forgive me if any of this was said before about sort of where we are. This clinic should have never been shut down without a real plan on how to have the full range and capacity of services that existed at that site. When the clinic was closed down, there was no signage put outside, there was no plan for community partners to be at the site. The only real plan that the city had was to redirect people to the Riverside Clinic and that was not a good plan. After working with James and Mark and Jim and Andy and a lot of folks that are here, and convening some emergency meetings after the clinic was closed down, and working with State Senator Hoylman and Assemblymember Godfrey and Borough President Gail Brewer, we were able to get the department to do some temporary measures, which really are Band-Aids and do not in any way take care of the issue that we're seeing. So I did get a commitment during the budget negotiations. Our city's budget gets adopted typically the last week in June, and over Memorial Day weekend, the end of May, I got a commitment from City Hall to pay for a prefabricated unit to be able to replace all the clinical services that took place at the Chelsea Clinic. That, for some reason, the Department of Health said that it wasn't doable. They had reasons which I'm not here to defend, but they said that it would take too long, it was going to take too long to manufacture, they were going to do a lease, etc. I just want to say that when we had an Ebola crisis a year ago, the city mobilized overnight to ensure that we had a prefabricated unit that could treat people with Ebola. In the last month, we had a Legionnaire's outbreak, and for those who know the history about Legionnaire's and HIV and AIDS, from a long time ago, the mobilization that the federal government made around Legionnaire's back then and didn't make around HIV and AIDS, we saw the city come together and pass emergency legislation 2 weeks ago on Legionnaire's and harness tens of millions of dollars worth of resources to do something. Now, I'm not here to speak for the Department of Health, but I will, they're not here either, but I will tell you that I agree that if this city, with a $78 billion annual budget, wants to take care of an issue rapidly and quickly, it can do it.
Right.
And so, this building and these walls are hallowed grounds. The people that came before us and fought to save millions of lives through the access of drugs, we cannot slip backward. And you have my commitment, and Mark and James and Jeremiah and Jim and Andy were in a meeting with me a couple of weeks ago, that we are continuing to press the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to get a permanent, temporary facility to open up as quickly as possible to be able to replace the services there. And they have come to the table with a range of options. None of them are perfect, but we are continuing to push and push and push to get them to do the right thing. And I think one thing, I'm not grateful that the clinic closed with a plan, but I just want to end by saying this. One thing I am grateful for that has come out of all of this is, besides the activism and this town hall meeting that we are seeing around the issue, I think TAG and ACT UP, James particularly, and Mark, have really brought the issue to the fore to the department related to syphilis and gonorrhea and chlamydia and STIs. The Bloomberg administration cut the Department of Health $200 million. $200 million. And again, I'm not going to speak for Jay Varma, but I will tell you that what Jay says is that has had a significant impact on public health in New York City being cut to the bone like that. This past budget, we added $22 million in public health monies, and the council put in $3.9 million, which is a drop in the bucket. I'm not saying it's great, for ending the epidemic to align with the governor's blueprint. And so there's more to do. I feel hopeful in some ways. Maybe I'm a naive optimist, but I feel hopeful that in the next month, because of, I think, the pressure that we all have brought to bear, we are going to see some news around the city putting in additional resources and dollars related to STIs and to HIV and AIDS that otherwise we probably wouldn't have received. So I stand in solidarity with you. I thank you all for having this and for the activism, and I look forward to standing together in the days and weeks to come to get our community the health care that it deserves.
Let's
Thank you.
stand up
So, if I read you correctly, we are going to march to the Chelsea Clinic. Before we do that, I just want to repeat that, and I think everybody knows this, we're not going to get what we want unless we make them very, very, very uncomfortable over a prolonged period of time. And while right now going to the Chelsea Clinic is what we want to do, no one who is there is going to be made uncomfortable because no one is there. Okay? So daytime actions targeting City Hall need to happen. And in order for them to happen, we have to come together and organize a little bit. So everyone in this room, unless you're a member of the press, but even if you are a member of the press, did you sign in? Did you give us your contact information? Can we reach you? Are you following ACT UP on Twitter? ACT UP New York, ACT UP NY. Are you following ACT UP on Facebook, the ACT UP New York Facebook group or Facebook page? That is where you will find out when daytime actions, when people are there in their offices, when we can make them very uncomfortable. And, you know, it's great that folks are working on it, but they're not going to come through unless we make them come through. Correct? So, again, can I get a show of hands? Who's willing to come back in the daytime, right? And make some, raise some hell so that we can get this. Yes. Act up, fight back.